The night he agreed to the blind date, rain slid down the city like tears that refused to stop. And as Daniel Carter adjusted the rearview mirror of his aging sedan, he felt the familiar weight of his past settle on his chest. He was not nervous about meeting a woman. He was nervous about hope itself, because hope had hurt him before. And he had learned the hard way that life often takes more than it gives. A single father, a delivery driver, a man stitched together by responsibility and regret, Daniel had survived by keeping his heart closed. Yet on this night, with a box of white lilies resting on the passenger seat and a GPS guiding him toward a stranger's address, fate was quietly preparing to reopen wounds he thought had healed forever. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of good deeds, take a moment to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Daniel's life had been reshaped 12 years earlier, on a morning that began like any other and ended with him standing alone in a hospital hallway, holding his newborn daughter while the woman he loved slipped away forever. Emily Carter's death from sudden complications during childbirth had turned Daniel into a man split in two. One half grieving, the other forced to grow up overnight. Raising Lily alone in a small apartment in Ohio, Daniel learned to measure time not in years but in school lunches, packed, scraped knees cleaned, and late-night fevers endured without rest. He worked whatever jobs he could find, eventually settling into floral deliveries because they allowed flexible hours, and ironically, because flowers felt like something Emily would have loved. They reminded him that beauty could exist even when life was cruel. Years passed, and Daniel became known as the quiet man who always showed up. He never missed a parent-teacher meeting, never forgot Lily's birthday, never complained even when exhaustion hollowed him out. Lily grew into a bright, compassionate teenager, the kind of girl who noticed lonely classmates and volunteered at shelters on weekends. It was Lily who pushed Daniel to sign up for an online dating app, gently insisting that her father deserved companionship, not just survival. Daniel resisted for months, convinced that love was a chapter already written and closed, but loneliness has a way of whispering when the house is quiet, and eventually he agreed. The blind date came through a simple profile with minimal details. A woman named Grace Miller recently moved back to the area, preferring a quiet dinner over anything loud or flashy. Daniel accepted mostly to prove to Lily that he had tried. The plan was straightforward: deliver flowers to Grace's address as a courtesy arranged by the app, then meet her at a small restaurant downtown. It felt safe, structured, and emotionally distant enough for Daniel to manage. He had no idea that the address on his phone was about to pull him back into a moment he had buried deep inside himself. The rain eased as Daniel parked in front of a modest house with a neatly kept porch and a single light glowing warmly inside. He took the lilies, stepped out of the car, and walked up the path, his shoes damp against the concrete. When the door opened, time seemed to falter. The woman standing there was calm, poised, and smiling softly, but her eyes, unfocused and clouded, told a story Daniel recognized instantly. She was blind, and then it hit him like a wave, not recognition of her face, but recognition of a memory, sharp and undeniable, from a decade ago. 10 years earlier, Daniel had been driving home late one winter night after a double shift. Snow blanketed the roads, visibility poor, exhaustion heavy. On a quiet stretch of highway, he had noticed a car overturned in a ditch, hazard lights flickering weakly against the dark. Most people would have driven past, afraid or too tired to stop, but Daniel had pulled over without thinking. Inside the wreckage was a young woman, bleeding, disoriented, her eyes wide with terror she could not fully see. He had called emergency services, held her hand to keep her conscious, and stayed until help arrived. She had lost her sight permanently due to head trauma, the doctors later said, but she had lived. Daniel never learned her name. He left the hospital that night believing he had simply done what anyone should. Now standing on a porch with rainwater clinging to his jacket, Daniel realized that anyone had not stopped. He had, and the woman he once saved was now opening her door to him, unaware of who he was, trusting fate to guide her toward something new. Grace thanked him for the flowers, her voice gentle and sincere, and Daniel felt a strange tightening in his throat. He handed them over, unable to explain why his hands trembled. The dinner that followed was quiet, filled with small talk and careful politeness. But beneath the surface, Daniel wrestled with the truth. Grace spoke about rebuilding her life after losing her vision, about resilience learned the hard way, about faith that carried her through dark years. She mentioned the accident once, briefly, as a turning point that taught her how fragile life could be. She never spoke with bitterness. She spoke with gratitude. Daniel listened, absorbing every word, realizing that the woman across from him was strong in ways he had never allowed himself to be. As the weeks passed, Daniel and Grace continued seeing each other. What began as obligation slowly transformed into anticipation. Grace's world was rich with sound, texture, and emotion, and she noticed things Daniel had long overlooked, the way his voice softened when he talked about Lily, the pauses he took before sharing anything personal, the sadness he carried quietly. Daniel, in turn, admired Grace's courage, her humor, her deep compassion for others navigating invisible struggles. Still, he could not bring himself to tell her the truth. He feared that revealing his role in her past would shatter the fragile connection they were building, or worse, make her feel indebted. The challenge Daniel faced was not whether to love again, but whether he deserved to. Years of grief had convinced him that happiness was something other people earned, not him. He struggled with guilt over moments of joy, as if smiling too freely would betray Emily's memory. Grace challenged that belief without knowing it. She spoke often about how survival itself carried responsibility, how being saved meant choosing to live fully, not cautiously. Each word felt like it was meant for Daniel alone. Everything changed one afternoon when Grace visited Daniel's home for the first time and met Lily. The bond between them formed instantly, rooted in warmth and mutual respect. Lily admired Grace's independence and honesty, while Grace admired Lily's kindness and maturity. Watching them together, Daniel felt something shift. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like a burden. It felt like a possibility. The truth finally surfaced, not through confession, but through circumstance. During a charity event for accident survivors, Grace was asked to share her story. Daniel stood in the back of the room, listening as she described the night that changed her life, the stranger who stopped when no one else did, the unseen hero who gave her a second chance. As she spoke, her voice steady but emotional, Daniel realized that silence was no longer protection. It was distance. Later that night, with the weight of years pressing down on him, Daniel told Grace everything. He explained who he was, what he had done, and why he had stayed quiet. He expected anger, shock, maybe even withdrawal. Instead, Grace responded with a depth of emotion that left Daniel breathless. She told him that some connections were written long before people understood them, that kindness had a way of circling back, and that saving someone once did not mean owning their future, but it could mean being part of it. Their relationship deepened with honesty as its foundation. Daniel learned that love did not erase loss. It made room alongside it. Grace did not replace Emily, nor did she try to. She honored Daniel's past while inviting him into a future that felt earned rather than stolen. Lily, watching her father heal, learned that brokenness did not disqualify people from joy. As months turned into a year, Daniel reflected often on how close he had come to missing this life. One choice to stop on a snowy road, one decision to accept a blind date, one act of kindness that rippled forward in ways he could never have imagined. He understood now that second chances rarely announce themselves loudly. They arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary moments. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment now to like the video, share it with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps spread stories that remind us we are not alone. Before the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment below with the words "Kindness Matters" if you believe that small acts can change lives. In the end, Daniel did not see himself as a hero, and Grace did not see herself as someone rescued. They saw each other as two people shaped by loss and grace, walking forward together. On quiet evenings when Daniel delivered flowers for work and returned home to a house filled with laughter, he understood something profound. Life does not always give us what we want, But sometimes, if we are brave enough to keep our hearts open, it gives us what we need. And that, more than anything, was the miracle he never saw coming.